Hey, sports parents. If we haven't met, my name is Jonathan Carone, and I'm the host of the show. Today is a special episode. If you're watching or listening to this on the day it comes out, April 2nd is International Autism Awareness Day. I'll be the first to admit that it took me way too long in life to notice and really care about kids with special needs. I knew they were around, but it didn't impact me directly. So it's just not something I thought about too much. And I think that that's part of why I wanted to do a special episode today to highlight kids with special needs in sports. I don't want anyone to go as long in life as I did without considering those with autism or some other need. Our guest today is one of my closest friends, Eric Williams. I'll let Eric tell you more about his journey in the episode, but he has a son on the autism spectrum, along with a quote unquote neurotypical son as well. In the conversation, we talk about his journey as a special needs dad, what it's looked like for his family, and how he'd encourage those of us or those walking similar journeys. He also gives those of us who don't have special needs kids tips for how we can interact or support those who do. If I'm being completely honest with you, I wasn't sure how this conversation would go, and I was kind of nervous to tiptoe through it because it's such a hard topic, but I truly am thrilled with where it went, and I'm excited to share it with you. With all that out of the way, here's my conversation with Eric today. We're here with Eric Williams. Eric, go ahead and say hey to everybody.
Hey, what's up, guys and girls?
Hey,
what's up, people?
before we get into the big questions of today, I want to introduce Dad to everybody. So can you tell us a little bit about your kids, what they play, if they play anything, and then what it's like being dad to them?
Yeah, so I got two boys, 13 and 12 right now, Calvin and Oliver. Calvin was born 6 weeks premature. He had a category 4 brain hemorrhage. That's probably why we're talking about this here. But he's on the autism spectrum, has anxiety, ADHD, all kinds of acronyms that don't really mean a lot. But if you're into neurology, he's got PVL, Dandy Walker syndrome, all these sorts of things. Basically what happened was before he was born, there's 4 parts of your brain, 4 ventricles, and all 4 of them were filled with some sort of fluid, blood, whatever. And as that fluid receded out of his brain, it started pulling little chunks of brain matter out. So his brain looks like Swiss cheese in those areas. And we were told he was never going to walk, he was never going to talk, he was never going to hold a job. We would have to provide care for him 24/7. And to this day, he's completely turned that 180. He's walking, he's talking, we can't get him to shut up, that sort of stuff. So, it's been a true miracle and a joy. But that's Calvin. He's our older son. And then Oliver, is what I guess in the biz you call a neurotypical child. And he's 12. He's in 6th grade. He plays baseball. Archery, tennis. I mean, he's in band. He's the wannabe and everything kid. But he's also diagnosed with ADHD, and he is on an IEP as well for being involved in the gifted and talented side. So, I have essentially 2 children that span the entire spectrum, but stuff we love to do together. We love to ski. We love to hike. So some of those like non-traditional team sports we engage in together. My wife will skis and hikes with us as well. And I actually coach my younger son on his club baseball team and as well as his little league baseball team too.
I want to get on the ski stuff later because we got a question in here that I want to talk about the individual stuff. But yeah, you weren't kidding about how you can't get him to stop talking, because I finally met you for the first time in person back in December. And like
I was wondering where that one was going to go. Yeah.
You and I have known each other for like 4 or 5 years at this point. We finally met in person at a Sheetz gas station. You were on a road trip back home after a trip around Thanksgiving. Yep. And he was so excited to get Cheerwine. Like you could not, like we were trying to talk for the first time in person and all he wanted to do was, Dad, can I have this? Can I have this? And you had to be like, dude.
Yep.
From the perspective of someone who was told he would never talk.
Right.
Like I know in the midst of the day to day, it can be a little bit like, dude, just, can you give me a minute? But like when you pull back, like what is that like to compare what you were told when he was born to what you're experiencing 13 years later?
Oh yeah. And yeah, for sure. And I think every parent understands this, where it's like you have Your kids have problems day to day. Nobody is immune from day to day problems and being upset. But if you look at like the span of what you as a family have gone through, it's pretty miraculous in a lot of different ways. And for us in particular, my wife and I, we chat about it too. And now Calvin's at a fun age where he'll ask questions like this. But for 6 weeks he was in the NICU. He was in a little isolate chamber. He had his he had his little DJ earmuffs on. He has a little eye shade and the UV light. So we used to like call it was like Club NICU that we would be hanging out and he had a little like reflective thingy that looked like, I don't know. It was just it was a lot of fun being there and not being able to take him home. But like he was essentially his entire body was the size of my hand, and I remember like his foot was the size of my thumb, and it was just it's amazing to look back and not
and he's not little now,
right? Ignoring any diagnosis, like ignoring any bigger diagnosis, like going from the fact that you see them like that in that environment with for any parents that have been in the NICU, or I would imagine the PICU as well, like alarms are going off, and the most, or at least up there in list of like most saint-worthy types of nurses are dealing with these kids and helping them and shepherding them through this journey and parents that have no idea, like they're just so fragile. So to see him go from that to long periods of time where he was nonverbal to periods of time where he has he still does have some emotional regulation issues, but going through like significant emotional regulation from elopement at school, which to the, for those of you that aren't in the world, that means running away, running out of the classroom. Kindergarten, he had incidents where he was just so upset in the situation that he like took off all his clothes. In the school, there's been times where he's, he'll turn over tables and emotionally having a hard time regulating, to like now he's holding in-depth conversations. And literally on that road trip that we went out of the way on the way back to see you guys, he's asking questions like, what happened on September 11th? We're like processing through these like major adult conversations with a kid that I've seen scans of his brain. He's literally has holes in his brain. So to understand how far he's come is just nothing short of a miracle, mostly just because I just don't understand it. What goes on in your brain. I don't understand what goes on in my brain, let alone what happens in a tiny less than 4 pound being that gets his head filled up with, whatever sort of, I don't know. I'm rambling at this point, but yeah, miraculous. TLDR.
All right. I want to hear some about that in a second, but I want to rewind before he was born.
Yeah.
Because I know you have sport management in your background. You used to be kind of the recreation director at a community center. I admit that for way too long, I didn't even think about how to involve kids with special needs in sports.
Yep.
Before you had a special needs kid of your own, was that something on your radar, or were you like most of us 20 years ago that we just unfortunately didn't think about it too much?
Yes and no. I would love to say, I'd love to go back and rewrite the past and make it like I was some, extremely like altruistic martyr that knew about everything in the beginning. But I didn't. I think I was like most people. I think we were a little bit different just because of how close we were to situations like this. So my first career was in the YMCA. I was a sport director in the YMCA, youth and adult sports, in Northwest Ohio for, I think, from the time I could start working, I worked with sports camps all the way until, I got out of that career into different careers. But one thing that would come across, because this would happen quite frequently, we didn't have a special needs league, like the little league that we're involved in now. They have a great special needs league and program. We have a community center here that has good special needs programs. They didn't exist in the early 2000s. Literally, I started working there in 1998. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't there. But what we did have was we had developmentally, you could tell there were developmentally delayed kids that it was so difficult to figure out what to do to serve them well, right? Because let's say you have a fifth grader that has the developmental skills or the emotional skills of a second grader, but they have the body of a fifth grader. And so, back then, especially, even now it's tough, but back then, especially, it was difficult to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and let, Gavin hang out on this third grade team because that really fits him more developmentally appropriately. Because then other parents, not all of them, but other parents, oh, well, he's such a big kid, he's going to run over my kid and blah, 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 blah. That's okay. Gavin's mom and dad are going to be with him, or we've got a buddy that's going to hang out with Gavin and so we would do little things like that to try and make it work for some of like the rec level leagues. Now, obviously, when we get into more competitive leagues, one of the trademarks of YMCA up until that point, like before middle school, was everybody plays, everybody wins. We don't keep score, that sort of thing. So in the end, it was like, it doesn't really matter if you had a fifth grader on a third grade team, as long as they weren't, as long as they weren't a danger to themselves or to others. So there was a little bit of that going on. We had special needs kids in our program. We had kids with Down syndrome and things like that, and trying to find ways creatively to make it fit. It was on our radar. But yeah, it definitely, I would say, yeah, I might have had a different view because I was on that side, but to the average rank and file person, it would range from, it's just an annoyance, oh my gosh, there's that kid again, to like, some of them would be like you see now on social media, where it's like you have the special needs kid that gets a chance to play on their high school team for one shot, something like that. So, or it was a charity case. So it's like you get annoying to like charity, and neither of those is a good answer, because I think really what we want to do is we want to serve kids on their level, and help them succeed at the level that they're able to, both physically and mentally, emotionally.
I had a kid on my soccer team a couple years ago. We were still in U8 at the time. So he
Okay.
would have been 6, maybe 7 years old. And mom never explicitly told me that he was on the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
but I could tell just the way he acted. Somewhere on the autism spectrum was where this kid fell.
Sure.
A lot of emotional regulation issues. He kept saying that this was a good episode, because he thought every practice was a YouTube episode. This was a great episode. And so by the end, like we involved him at that level. We were playing 5 or 6 on the field at a time. So I mean, he would get in the game just as much as everybody else, because again,
Sure.
they're 6 and 7 years old. I remember the last game of the season. Our team that year, we won every game by at least 5 or 6 goals. I didn't count, but I just know every game we had to pull back. We had, for some reason, the way the roster shook out, we had a team full of kids in their 8-year-old year plus that kid. And
Yep.
so by the end of the year, he was the only one who hadn't scored. And so we spent the entire last half of the game trying to get that kid a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And like all our kids would pass, they were cheering him on so much. Like by the end of the year, like our kids were like legitimately wanting to help him, which was great to
Yep.
see the progression of kids realize something and was different and then want to help. And he got a shot in the end of the game that literally landed on the line, on the goal line.
Oh
and
my
if you
gosh.
don't know soccer, to be a goal, it's got to fully cross the line.
Yeah.
And so we all just decided it counted, and we
Right.
celebrated like crazy with him. And it was one of the more joyful experiences of my youth sports journey as a dad and as a coach. And I've had another kid who I think is somewhere on the spectrum. Again, a parent didn't tell me explicitly, but just watching, you can kind of, there's something. And
Sure.
and coaching him, like it's always a journey as a coach, because especially as a rec league, I believe rec league is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Rec league should be accessible for all kids of all developmental stages, of all financial spots. Like it's the league for everyone to come and get a place to play. And the hard part as a coach is you have a special needs kid on the team, but you also have a kid on the team who's about to move to competitive in the next year once it starts.
Right. Yep.
And learning how to coach that entire spectrum is one of the more difficult things I've had to do. And I have a degree in coaching. So like, I just imagine how hard it is for parents who are stepping in just because the league needed a volunteer to be able to do that. And I'm empathetic to how hard it is because I believe that kid deserves a chance to play, but I also understand how hard it is to coach them.
Yeah. Yeah. And let me just jump in here because I want to set some groundwork. I know you and I talked about this before about like, the not really knowing or stepping into this area. And I think, again, I am not the spokesperson for every parent with a special needs child.
You're just the one who I knew the best. And so
right,
I made you come on this episode because I knew this was going to be a hard thing for me to talk about. So I needed a safety net.
So let me just say this. I think from a coaching perspective, because my background is not in coaching special needs, right? I've coached at basically every level you can in the amateur area. So it's like, I think over that course of time, what I've developed this understanding for myself is that every athlete is a special needs athlete. If you're doing coaching right, you are coaching every athlete to their special need. It may not be special need in the way that, we think psychologically or physiologically or disability wise now, but every athlete has special needs that they have. Think about it from the standpoint of some of your athletes, and I'll just call them athletes, because they are at any age. Some of your athletes don't have a steady parent figure. Dad, mom, whatever, right? And you as the coach, you help fill that special need. Some athletes, they don't have a source of encouragement in their life. And that is a special need that you can help fill for them. So I think back to even like in the professional level, Phil Jackson, great NFL, NBA coach and player. There's the famous story of like he would give a book every season to his players. It would be a different book for every individual player. Could you imagine knowing your players so well and knowing what they need enough and then knowing enough about books to be like, you specifically, here's the book this season that I picked out for you for your personal development. Now, the rec league parent that gets tapped on the shoulder and voluntold to coach the team, right? Of course, you don't have that kind of bandwidth, but I think the idea is the same, that if we can tear down this image of like there's the special needs kids that are disabled, so to speak, or less abled, and then we have the regular kids or the normal kids, and just tear it down and say every single kid that you are coaching has a special need, and the best coaches can step in and help them in that way. And then when you see that, and you see kids that have clinical special needs, we'll just call them, or disabilities or whatever, right? That is not as weird of an adjustment. That just means, oh, this is a different need that this child has, that I just have to find more resources or a different resource or something like that to help fulfill that. So I just want to put that out there because I think that helps frame our discussion a little bit when it comes to coaching.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this years and years now, and I've never thought about it in that framework. I love the way it's almost like desensitizing what could be a sensitive label. Yeah. Because it
normalizing it. Yeah.
It normalizes something that could be taken the wrong way. And as you, the listener, I'm walking around saying the wrong thing on this episode and using the wrong label. So what I want you to hear the rest of this is like, I hope you know by now my heart's in the right place. So if I use the wrong label or I say the wrong thing, I'm going to apologize in advance because I do that type of stuff. My heart's not there. I'm trying to walk that. So I know that this is a highly sensitive topic. So if I say the wrong label, I apologize in advance.
On behalf of all people that have kids with special needs, we accept your apology.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. All right.
You know why? Because they can't say otherwise right now.
They can't. Yeah. They can only unsubscribe or turn this off.
That's
or,
true.
And they could leave a negative review. But
yeah, leave me a review at EricW712 on all major platforms. Anyway, go ahead.
So I know your oldest doesn't currently play a sport,
right?
But you coach your younger one.
Yes.
Your wife is a coach at the middle school level.
Uh-huh.
And you all are around traditional team sports a lot. Mm-hmm. How has his journey been being around those teens, but not being on the actual field or the court? How have other kids involved him? How
Yep.
has he learned to be around? Like, what's that been like for him?
Yeah. So, a little bit of backstory too. Like, we had kids right around that time. Obviously 12 and 13. You can think about if any of you have kids in that age. Like, we moved right before COVID happened, and then COVID happened, and so there's a good solid chunk of the most formative age in youth team sports that we just did not get our kids involved in. Now, I'm an athlete. My wife is an athlete. We've played team sports our entire lives. Everything else, like coach played, whatever. So that was difficult for us. At the same time, like, we agreed as parents, we're not going to be the parents that force our kids into whatever. They have to be active in something, but we're not going to be the, like, okay, now you see all this stuff on like what Christian McCaffrey's dad did with him. Like, no, we're not going to do that. So that frames everything as is. As we started going through and getting them involved in camps, because it was kind of like that was the easiest thing to do first. Sports camps, day camps, do, some of those types of things. We started to realize that my older son, Calvin, he probably isn't set for team sports. That would be a little bit tougher unless we wanted to get him into a special league that was a special needs league. So he's been in other team sport adjacent type of situations. Like, we got him involved in CrossFit for a while. And so that is an individual athletic, event that is done in and around other people. But it was a little bit easier for us to help manage him, help out, not make it as, not have as much of a negative impact on the people around him. So he's done that. He's also very interested in kind of solo sports like tennis or anything else like that. So just to kind of set that aside to any special needs parent that is like, okay, maybe that's another idea. But for Calvin, it's really been about, trying to have him participate at the level that he can participate at his interest level. So in some cases, what that looks like is he's just sitting on the sideline. We got his screen or his tablet or whatever, and he's got his headphones on, and he just zones out, but he's there with us, right? He's in proximity. He's not necessarily mixing in with that. So that happens at times. As he's gotten older, there's been able to be more independence where we can either leave him on his own or have somebody else watch him or other things like that. I will say what has been nice is partnering him up with some kids that just will naturally, like, as soon as he entered middle school, it's like he had 2 or 3 kids that you would consider the popular kids, right? They were good athletes and everything like that. And they just start sticking up for him. And when they're out doing PE or whatever other physical activity, they want to be on his team or they want to help him out. And I have no recipe to make that happen, but that is a piece of parenting gold for us, is to look at a kid and say, wait, you're saying this kid here, the starting pitcher, shortstop for one of the area travel leagues, wants to hang out with my son when they're out doing recreation time for, recess or whatever? Oh, okay. That's pretty sweet. So, those have been some of our journey as we've gone along there, but for the most part, it is interesting. I would say from a coach's perspective, from a dad's perspective, I think I've been working a lot on this for myself, but if I can be completely honest, there's a embarrassment level and a shame level that if I'm not careful in managing will come up for me, because I've got, one son that is participating fully, and then there's a kid that occasionally is yelling out outbursts or doesn't understand social emotional cues or is having a deregulation moment, a meltdown, so to speak. And it's like, at times it's like having a toddler in a 13-year-old's body. And that, for anybody that has toddlers, you know how difficult that is. Now add 50, 60 pounds on top of that, right?
He's not little. He's not little.
No, and the ability to run. I mean, he can run, so it's like that causes some issues. And I would say that those are some things that I'm still working on for myself to try and make sure that, number one, I am well emotionally regulated in situations. And it's challenged me as a coach to identify some of those situations. One thing I'll say, this is kind of like maybe for your other, coaches of regular rec teams. I was thinking about this the other day. I was actually going to text you about it. It's like, I've had to find different situations and times where it's like, is this actually coaching or is this me coping and trying to regulate myself? So, for instance, your post-game huddle with your team is not your time to try and emotionally regulate yourself, you know? And I think too many coaches don't recognize that. They're flying off the handle, or they're yelling, or they're saying the negative thing to the kid in front of them, and it's not really about coaching that kid. It's about my inability to be emotionally regulated before stepping into that environment. And so having a special needs son is really helping me, because he is like, his emotional regulation issues are out for everyone to see, and we are working on those every single day. So as a coach and a dad, it makes me better at recognizing those situations when I'm like, oh, I want to coach, air quotes for those of you listening, I want to coach in this situation, but no, that's not really me coaching. That's me venting because I have not emotionally regulated or distanced myself from the outcome of this game or this play or this situation. So that I think that's probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me coaching wise, a gift that Calvin has given me.
I want to push in a little bit because we're friends, and I think you're okay with me doing this. So I'm going to go there, and you can text me later and say bad words to me.
I'm an open book, buddy.
There is the tension between coaching your younger son, who is neurotypical, while having a son who is on the autism spectrum and has all of his needs. And because you're Oliver's coach, you're naturally going to spend some extra time with him because he's the one playing the games, going to the tournaments. The family's going to be kind of built around his schedule a little bit in a way that outside looking in could look a little unfair to Calvin.
Right.
How do you all handle that? Both in terms of trying to balance it out, but also like when you're just working through it mentally yourself, like, crap, I feel like I'm being unfair to one or the other, or I'm focusing too much. Cause I know, like, I have an 8 and a 9-year-old, and both of them play sports. I coach one's team. I don't coach the other. And I know that I'm going to miss games for Olivia because I'm coaching Owen. And I know how guilt stricken I feel from that. And so add in the other stuff that you guys are dealing with, and I can't imagine what that feels like. So open the book. How do you all deal with that? What does that feel like? Yeah.
So I think in one way we would be lucky. I know that not everybody in my situation would be dealing with it the same way, but like Calvin, he is an independent kid. He would love nothing more than to be playing Minecraft all day, every day, and eating, anything that's beige. So, you know what I mean? Like mac and cheese, pizza, chicken nuggets, like that. If he could control his own life,
the Jonathan Carone pre-Zep bound diet. That was me.
That's right. I mean, just throw in a YouTube video or throw in, Minecraft, and he's on it. So there is a little bit of like, when we don't involve ourselves in his life, that's his like baseline of what he wants or what he would do on his own. So I think the tension for us is more so making sure that we're not, and please, parents, don't take this. This is not an attack on anyone else. This is just my words for me, that I'm not being a lazy parent, right? There's times where I'm overwhelmed and I'm just like, I need to put the oxygen mask on myself first. And, so go ahead, take your screen and your chicken nuggets and go over there and you be you, whatever, man. Like, the battle is not worth fighting times. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the times where I'm like, I just don't want to, I'm lazy. I'm actually being lazy right now. I'm not giving my all. And so there are times where I have to find things to involve myself in with Calvin. The other thing is, all of the activity, that's a natural, that's at least a natural thing we could point to help pull him out of his comfort zone. So we're going to go to, we're going to go down to the park, and we're going to go, I'm coaching. Mama's coming down later. Calvin, you're going to go when Mama comes. I'm going to take Ollie right now. All right. Take a snack, take a this, take a that, take something that you're going to. So it helps get him out of the house. That's great. The other aspect is that because we have a kid who is, very active. I mean, he wants to be involved in everything. Oliver, my younger, he wants to be involved in every sport and everything. That kind of pulls Calvin out of it too. So, we live really close to our local high school. I mean, with 2 blocks. And so now that they're a little older, they're like, we're going to walk down to the high school tennis courts. We're going to play tennis together. And it's like, wow, that is great. So they can be involved in sports together. And Oliver, the other day, he told me, he said, I think tennis is making me better at baseball. And I said, oh yeah, really? And he's like, yeah, I think I'm getting quicker. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, sure. I mean, right. Yeah. He's like, all right.
Your 12-year-old puberty body being quick. Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Coach would say otherwise. But Dad goes, yeah, great. I'm getting quicker and my hand-eye coordination is better. So they could actually feed off of each other in that way. But you're right. There is a bit of, not as much as like I'm ignoring Calvin or I'm not, I'm playing favorites with Oliver, because part of it is like, I'm only doing this because Oliver wants me to. At the end of the season, I ask him, all right, one, do you want to sign up for Little League again? Do you want to sign up for club again? And then 2, do you want me coaching your club team? And do you want me to assist on your Little League team? And if he says no to either one of those, the answer is no. And it's fine.
Oh, darn,
so that's
I don't have to coach again.
Right. And I mean, I would probably coach something no matter what. But, it's like, man, do I want to deal with all of the garbage that goes along with coaching, that sort of stuff? No. So there is a bit of that where it's like, if Calvin ever said, when Calvin goes, hey, Daddy, will you come help me do this? Or we get involved in whatever he wants to get involved in. If it is a team sport or it is a group project, great. Maybe that's a board game. Maybe that's a card game. Maybe that's something else. So it is, to kind of boil it down, I want to be responsive to what my kids are drawn to, number one. Then the middle category is, yeah, of course, there's going to be some things like when we decide we're going to go skiing as a family, plenty of times where Calvin is the first one to say he doesn't want to go, or he's the first one to say I'm done, or I'm cold, or I'm hungry, or whatever. And, and if I'm not careful, I let that ruin my entire trip that we spend literally hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on for this stuff. But it's like, there is that middle territory of, we are going to get you out of your comfort zone. We are going to set rules in our house that say, you are going to do something active. It doesn't have to be name this sport, but you are going to do something active. And we have other guidelines like that. Then the third category of stuff is like, what is it just not worth it? Like, I'm not going to push either of my kids to do things that they are, one, not for, they don't want to do, and it's not really going to benefit me or them to push them into it. So that's kind of mentally how we split those things up. And then the final thing is for anybody that has more than one kid, or if you have a kid and a spouse, like intentionally spending time. Let me just say all this to all you husbands that are coaches. You should intentionally spend time trying to focus on doing things that your wife wants to do, even in season, So same type of deal where it's like, Calvin and I will go and we'll go to Sonic, or we'll go to get ice cream or a drink or something or whatever. And we'll do something that he wants to do, just the two of us. Maybe that's a 20-minute trip once a week or once every 2 weeks. And it's not, a 3-day-a-week practice like I get with his brother, but that's what he wants. Not everybody needs the same amount of time. It's providing them that same intention. It's providing them the same quality when you are with them with that time.
And I think that's one of the things I have learned specifically with autism. And speaking to this where I'm wrong, but I know that the hyperfixation of things, from just the way the brain is wired for those on the autism spectrum, it's like, it's not a benefit to them to have to go do something. Sometimes just to sit with their thing, whatever their thing is, and to spend 4 hours doing a puzzle. Like, giving them that space is actually the most loving thing you can do with them at times, instead of forcing them out to go do something, because their brains are just wired differently, literally.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, the only caveat I would say is that everyone with autism is different. That's why it's a spectrum. Yep. Anybody who's neurodivergent. So like, for anybody listening, that I know that's not what you mean, but for everyone listening, don't just as a coach assume like, oh, I've got a kid on the autism spectrum, so he's probably going to be X, Y, or Z, or she's going to be like this. But yeah, it is same thing like we talked about. Every kid has a special need, and so it's like,
there are some traits, but the way those traits play themselves out can be wildly different depending on the kid.
Sure, exactly. And I would think of it, not to be crude, but in a rudimentary sense, it's like different breeds of dogs. There are some dogs, like a golden retriever or a whatever. It's like throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. All I want is for you to throw the ball. Great. The other dogs are like, all I want is just to sit here in the sunny spot, and that's it. It's like you can't treat every single dog like they're the same. In the same way as like for all of your athletes, you can't treat them all the same. And so there are some kids, it's like at practice, they're like, oh, I'll go shag. Yeah, can I go shag? I'll shag anytime. Yes. And if I like tell them not to, it's actually not benefiting them. Or it's like, oh, I'll run another one because they just want to be active. Oh, hit me more. I want to do that. And there's other kids, they don't, it's more of a battle. So it is finding out what is unique or what is special or what does he enjoy? What does she enjoy? What is that they are into, and feed into that. Don't try to shoehorn any of your kids, any of your athletes into one box just because, well, that's the way I coach. That's our program. That's a blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, right? You have to treat each of them uniquely and specially.
All right, we're going to switch gears completely because I want to hit on this before we run out of time. I put a request out on social to get questions for this conversation from parents who have kids with special needs. And so I've got 3 of them here that I want to hit on. And then, so we kind of got to move a little fast, but take your time as well.
Okay.
Here's the first one. My son has special needs and says exercise is hard. Do you know of any ways to motivate him to be active in general, even outside of sport?
Yes. Number one, and this, I know I'm new school on the coaching on this one, but if you're a coach, that's why I do not, or I try not to give running as punishments. Back in my day, we ran polls for every error or for every whatever. I don't do that. Maybe burpees, maybe push-ups, maybe other things like that, but not that like quote unquote exercising type of punishment. So number one, for a coach, that's that side. Number 2 is like exercise is hard, but that's because your child probably puts that in the category of exercise. So find what level of play your child loves to do, and encourage that. So when you see them active, what is it that they're doing and how can you encourage that? So if it's a play-based thing, maybe it's an obstacle course, maybe it's a scavenger hunt, maybe it's a superhero training. That's really why we started into CrossFit, was because we were watching American Ninja Warrior and we bought some like American Ninja Warrior stuff that we hung up in our basement. And it was like, hey, Calvin, do you know what's like this? CrossFit. And so now he's doing, well, not anymore, but at the time he was doing literally an hour worth of exercise that for him was like ninja training. It was superhero training. So getting into gymnastics, getting into other things like that. Finding non-traditional sports. Some kids do really well with like swimming or martial arts or dance or rock climbing, something like that. Find what they like to do that's active and encourage that.
That's really good. My son did a run club over the winter, and it was an hour of training every Sunday. It was they call it a spring conditioning to get ready for your spring sport or whatever.
Yep.
And they ran a ton, and he doesn't like to run, but it was all couched in games. They did this 15-minute circuit where the kids would choose the exercises they did at each cone, and they just played music, and you did it for 10 or 15 minutes. And it was like, I would have died doing that, but they're smiling the whole time because they don't realize it's exercise. They don't realize they were doing that. It was just this was part of the game they were playing.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you were like, break it down clinically and you say, well, technically what I want you to do is 30 minutes where your heart rate is above 140. That sounds terrible, right? That's awful. But once you mix it into like, you're going to play disc golf, or you're going to do this, or you're going to play a game. Oh, that's much better, right? Like, yeah, I'll do that.
You tell me to walk 2 miles through the woods?
No.
You
chase a little disc you've thrown?
You give me a 40-pound backpack with a bunch of rubber discs in there or plastic discs in there, and I have to throw them badly and miss trees. Sure, right. I'll go do that for 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I would call it the deviled eggs. It's the deviled eggs approach. You want to eat a dozen eggs? Well, not in our economy now, but like, you want to eat a dozen eggs? No. What if I cut them in half and mix them with a little bit of, mayo and whatnot and hard boil them? Yes, I'm all about that. I'll down them. So yeah, I would say the basic is you said exercise. Take away that stigma. Make it play, make it movement, make it healthy, make it, we want to sweat today. Whatever gets them, whatever they do, and then follow that momentum.
All right, next question for you.
Yep.
My son has autism. He plays basketball well, but has struggled with emotional regulation. How can we help him?
Woo.
That's an easy one, right?
Yeah, no. It also depends. So the answer is always it depends. But for any child with emotional regulation issues, some things that I have used that have been on the autism side that work with autistic kids on the spectrum and kids that aren't is, a lot of times if there is, one is rewriting or reframing situations. So always about those mental stories after something bad happens or after something that's undesirable happens where he's not emotionally regulated. Then that's a great time during a timeout, during whatever, during some time to either you as the parent or have a dedicated assistant coach go to them and say, hey, tell me what happened out there. Okay, tell me what if we were to rewrite that story? What would we do next time? Right? So to create those neurological pathways of what they can do. Because a lot of times, all of us, when we can't emotionally regulate, we don't see outside of the possibility that's right in front of them. That's why you hear like, oh, I saw red, right? Or I got tunnel vision. And the same is true for your kids that may have neurological delays or may have autism, be on the autism spectrum or anything else like that, is to reframe that. The other thing to me too is depending on their cognitive ability, obviously, is when something happens, I'll be like, hey, Jonathan, tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, like how big of a deal was that? How big of a problem was that? And most of the time they'll go like a 2 or a 3, right? Especially if they're old enough to know better. Hey, that kid didn't pass you the ball and you got really, really angry and stormed off the court. Let's talk about that. When he doesn't pass you the ball, how big of a problem is that on a scale of 1 to 10? A 4. And what about like storming off the court and throwing a chair on the sidelines? What on a level 1 to 10? What kind of reaction is that? A 10. Oh yeah. Okay. Let's see if we could get those things in line, right? So if there's a 4 problem, what would a 4 level reaction be? I take a deep breath. I say, hey, it's not fair you didn't pass to me. And I tell the coach, yeah, that's great, right? So see me modeling that where it's like, can we help them regulate based on other things other than like, stop whining, stop being a baby about it, right? None of that works. Hopefully your listeners all understand that none of that works. But the clip you're going to put on YouTube or on TikTok or whatever, everybody in the comments is going to hate that. But the bottom line is like helping them reframe it in a way that they can understand. And yes, that's going to take time. And yes, that's going to take you being emotionally regulated. So maybe... this is not for the commenter asked this, but like for coaches, I have a rule, like I have a deal with my other coaches. If my kid is emotionally dysregulated, I don't coach them out of it. That's the assistant coach's job. If their kid is emotionally dysregulated, I'll go and get them. If their kid is pitching and he's throwing a fit on the pitch on the mound, even if they're the ones that go and do the mound visit, I'm doing the mound visit today. I'm going to go and say, hey, Jake, what's up, man? Let's talk about it, right? Because I don't bring the same level of baggage and I can be calm because I don't have 13 years of experience with that kid. So that would be another thing is find somebody that you can trust that can help them redirect and help them emotionally regulate. Oh, also give them an acceptable place to, I'll say go. Give them a safe spot. And again, if you're like, oh, social justice warrior with your safe space, just save it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is give them an acceptable alternative. Hey, next time when that kid fouls you really hard, what you can do is you can slap the ground hard if you want, or you can clap really hard, or you can, like give them something they can do. You can give me a shirt tug and I'll sub you out and you can sit down and you can say cuss words into your hand. I don't know, like whatever it is for you, give them an acceptable alternative because that's another problem is when we don't reframe the story, when we don't help them regulate between what the cause was and what their reaction was, and we don't give them healthy alternatives, it's like an animal that's being caged or that's being backed into a corner and we wonder why they're scratching their face off. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, here's the last one of the questions that were sent in. It's less of a question, more of a story, but I want your opinion on it. This mom has a son with ASD and said that when he was in elementary school, team sports, baseball, basketball, they had too much going on. The buzzers and constant movement and noises became too much stimulation. But then he found Taekwondo and really began to thrive because of the discipline and the structure. After that, he moved on to cross country and track. And here's where the part that stood out to me that I want your opinion on. She said that he really struggled when he didn't get a PR or didn't win a race because it's hard for him to accept things in the gray areas. It was hard for him to connect performing well and not winning. So as a dad and as a coach, first off, how would you help the parent talk to the kid in that situation if you ran really well today, someone just happened to beat you, but they can't understand that? How would you help them?
First side is like, how much are we emphasizing race day versus practice? Because if 90% of your praise and attention is on race day, then 90 to 100% of their identity is going to be wrapped up in race day, right? ASD kid or not, right? We're all like that. It's just, it's going to be exponentially kind of magnified for some kids more than others. So, how much time do you spend asking them, what did you do during practice? How did you do? How did you feel? How did you run? Was this a, level 1 to 10 day? How did you feel on that one? So I would go for that. The other thing is, for some kids, especially if in your child's IEP, look to some of those things. If your child has an IEP or a 504 or whatever, and in one of them, like a lot of them are like, they need a visual calendar or they need a visual planner for events, then that should trigger to you go, do they have one for sports? So you make up something similar where it's like practice. If they practice 5 days a week and they have one competition, I'm giving them 5 check boxes, 6 check boxes total. They're all the same size. Practice, 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 game, or, whatever. So that way it's like we're checking off, how did we do? We're getting a sticker. We're getting a whatever sort of reward for the effort they put into, as well as what comes out. I think for adults, we would call this leading indicators and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator is something you can't change because it's in the past. A leading indicator are all the things that will lead up to what is going to hopefully produce a good result. So even with the kids on my baseball team, the baseball is terrible because baseball is a game of failure. You're supposed to fail 70% of the time. You fail 70% of the time, you're in the Hall of Fame. Like, what? Are you kidding me? If you have a 300 batting average for your whole career, you are most likely going to be in the Hall of Fame. So what we do is we reframe that and we give them different goals. So like for baseball specifically, I don't know if your readers would be interested, but I focus on, we have a formula for quality at bats. And there's essentially 9 different things that they can do to have a win for that at bat. And all 9 of those things are things that they can more or less, they can control at least one of those things. So for some ASD kids on the ASD spectrum, a lot of times it will be about control. They can't control the win. They can't control. So focus on celebrating the things that they can control and making that the most important. And then looking back and saying, okay, because now if I have, this is really nerding out, but now if I have like an entire season where I go, look at your performance in practice and now look at your performance, how it changes over time. So let's celebrate what happens in practice and emphasize that. And that's going to, give them other things to focus on, other things to celebrate.
So one of my favorite things to do on the show is I recognize I have blind spots and things that I haven't thought about. So anytime I have a smart person on here, I want to ask you, what's the thing I haven't asked yet that I need to ask today that you need to tell people about?
Well, the first thing we got to do is get a smart person, but no, just kidding. One thing I would say is like when it comes to special needs kids, and this applies to everything, is like don't make an assumption. Okay, so we read a lot of things, we see a lot of things, we see what happens in pop culture, and you get this impression of what a kid with MS is like, or what a kid with Down syndrome is like, or what a kid with cerebral palsy is like, or autism, and you have like a mental picture in your head, and every single kid is different. And I'm going to be a little irreverent here. Because here's the thing, Jonathan's like, yeah, well, when are you not? But this might need to be cut out.
I literally almost said that. I literally almost said that.
In the same way as you're not going to say, okay, all kids with autism are like this, or all kids with Down syndrome are like this, or whatever. Like you wouldn't automatically like look at a group of kids and be like, oh, the black one, that's going to be the fast one. Oh, the white one, that's going to be like the hard worker. You're not going to be on the football field and be like, oh, pure athleticism over here. And this is like, oh, he's a really good route runner over here. Oh, this one here's got a lot of fast twitch muscles. This one's a good student of the game. Like we know that we shouldn't do that for kids that aren't, have a clinical disability or have a clinical diagnosis. So don't do that with special needs kids as well. Take time to learn about them. You can ask their parents, even if it's like a situation you talk about where it's like, I think this kid is on the autism spectrum. You don't need to go up to a parent and say, hey, does Johnny have autism? Don't do that. But you say, hey, I'm trying to figure out some different ways that I can help motivate Johnny to do X. Or I see that maybe Johnny's having a hard time emotionally regulating when it comes to Y. What have you found is successful? Or is there anything that I can know that I can help when it comes to coaching him? And if you are a parent that has a kid with special needs, I just come out and I tell the parent, I tell the, I'll tell the coach or I'll tell the teacher, I'll tell the whatever, like this is going to get him, that. Or like anytime Calvin is introduced to somebody, he's extremely sarcastic and he loves puns and he loves dad jokes, but his vocal intonation will not tell you that he's being sarcastic. So there you go, just to know.
All right, last thing before we get out of here, because we do have to respect people's time. I like to end each episode with an encouragement each week. And so we have two places that we could go with this, and I'll let you choose which one you want to go on.
Okay.
Number one, how would you encourage parents who are navigating their journey with a kid who has special needs or autism? And number two, how would you encourage the parents within the community who have kids the same age as their own kids who have autism and they interact with them at school or in sports? So you can pick one or both. I'm sure we can take a little extra time if we need it, but I would love the encouragement on both of those.
Yeah. So at our last IEP meeting with Calvin, now that he's 13 in our state, he by law, he is supposed to be involved in the IEP meeting. And one of the IEP team members asked him and said, Calvin, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do to be for a job? He wants to be a YouTuber, obviously, like every kid does, but he wants to be a YouTuber that helps talk to parents about kids with autism. And this was the first time I'd heard this. I was like, oh my gosh. And somebody asked him, they said, Calvin, what would be one thing you would tell parents about raising a son with autism? And he said, don't give up. Don't ever give up. He said, even when it's tough, don't give up. And that was the word that I needed in that meeting. And so I'm like, I'm it's getting dusty in the school, school conference room. And it's like, don't ever give up. And I think that's the one thing with the kids, the parents who are navigating this journey with special needs kids. And I want you to know, like, I see you. I know the struggle you're going through. And taking any positive step forward, similar to that last question, like taking any positive step forward is a positive step forward. And there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be times where, like when with neurotypical kids, how you have sleep regression, there's going to be regression in their social emotional skills, coping skills. You're going to have meltdowns. You're going to have embarrassing moments. But from a kid that has autism, he said, the best thing you could do is don't give up. And switching that to the community.
Hey, if you're driving down the road right now and it's dusty as well, you can pull off to the side of the road and please don't get into a wreck right now. So,
and if, first of all, for people in the community, for every kid has special needs, like we said. And so, there is no sense of guilt of your kid is quote neurotypical or normal, none of that. But just to recognize that every parent is going through something and every kid is going through something. So whether they have a diagnosis or not, or they have a clinical issue or not, stepping in and having empathy and kindness for that kid is a win. Because I will say for everyone through probably even college, the interaction that you have with your children or how you encourage them to treat the other athletes on the field is way more important to their development than whether they win or lose the game, whether they have a PR or not, whether they score the goal or not. Because think about it. For those of you, if you could go back to high school or you go back to junior high or elementary school, you're going to remember a lot more of that kid that was really, really nice to you, or that kid that picked you up when you needed it, or that kid that defended you, or that kid was kind to you and nobody else was. You're going to remember that more than some random rec league game in the middle of March. So set a good example for them. Help them just be good humans to other people, because everybody's got something going on.
Eric, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
No problem.
That's it for today's episode. If you like the show, I'm going to invite you to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it would be a huge help for you to write up a small review. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button as well. If this episode has helped you in any way, or you think it could help someone else, the best thing you could do is to share it with them so that we can get this message out to as many people as possible. Most of all, I hope you have a great week watching your kids play the sports they love. Have a great week, everybody.